Hello and welcome to another episode of Country Fried, bringing you the best country music conversations. My name's Ryan Harmon, and we've got a special double episode for you today featuring two of the most respected singer-songwriters in the music business. But before we get to that, thanks for the great response to last week's episode featuring Barbara Fairchild. If you haven't had a chance to check it out yet, head on over to facebook.com/AETNTV and listen now. Likewise, if you still haven't seen Ken Burns Country Music yet, you need to get to it. Go to aetn.org/countrymusic for more information. And with that, let's get the show on the road. Today we're talking to Darrell Scott and Shawn Camp. I can pretty much sum up their careers by saying that even if you're not a fan of country music, you've heard their work before. Whether it's a song they recorded, one they wrote for another artist, or a song that they played on or produced, they've definitely made their mark on country music. Both artists also had the privilege of producing, writing, and touring with legendary Texas singer-songwriter Guy Clark, who's always been a huge influence on me as an artist. And I always wanted to meet him, but I never got the chance to, so it was really cool for me to hear Darrell and Shawn tell their Guy Clark stories. First up, we've got Darrell Scott. Now, as a songwriter, Darrell Scott's songs have been recorded by artists such as the Dixie Chicks, who recorded Long Time Gone and Heartbreak Town, Travis Tritt, who recorded It's a Great Day to Be Alive, and Sarah Evans, who recorded Born to Fly, and that's just scratching the surface. That's not including his song You'll Never Leave Harlan Alive, which has been recorded by Patti Loveless, Brad Paisley, and just about anybody else you could think of. As a sought-after musician, Darrell's performed with Robert Plant, Steve Earle, and the Zac Brown Band, just to name a few. We'll talk about that and more in my conversation with him at this year's Fayetteville Roots Festival. Check it out right here on Country Fried. So we're here at the Fayetteville Roots Festival with one of my favorite singer-songwriters, Darrell Scott. Darrell, thanks for joining me today. How you doing?
I'm doing great, Ryan. This is a great festival again, isn't it?
It certainly is, and you've been here before over the years, certainly to Fayetteville, and I believe even to this specific festival before, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is my third time here, maybe fourth, but I love it when I know that this is on my schedule. There's just something that's really right about how this festival is put together.
Well, and I think the same can be said for a lot of the projects you've done over the years. And I know the first time that I ever saw you was when you played at the Robinson Center Music Hall in Little Rock with Robert Plant's Band of Joy.
Wow, yeah.
And that night, just as a musician, changed my life.
Oh, wow.
I didn't really know anything about Americana music until that night.
Wow, well, now what do you think?
Well, I love it.
Yeah, it's the stuff, isn't it?
It's the way country music, I think, needs to go for the future, especially for people like us.
And maybe I think it's fine and dandy that it stays off on its own and hopefully doesn't try to take over the world. I mean, one of the beauties of Americana is that you can't define it. And so let's try not to define it. Let's let it be as wild and open as blues and as bluegrass and as singer-songwriter and as country and as folk as we can make it, because it's roots music. Americana, there's great Canadian Americana, there's great Scottish Americana. So Americana isn't a flag-waving thing, it's basically a nod to the culture that we come from over here.
Well, and nobody knows that better than you, because you've never let anybody put you in a box over the years. People have classified you as country, Americana, folk. And
I love it all.
Yeah, you've always just done what you do, and you've never really embraced just one thing.
No, that sounds boring to me. I have a wider palette, both as a listener and as a player of music and singer and writer and all that. I've seen the world. I still got a long ways to go. As far as opening my musical world, I love it all. I don't need a category for it myself.
Well, I think that may be what translates so well to other artists who have kind of latched onto your songs over the years and decided, hey, I want to record a version of that. And particularly, You'll Never Leave Harlan Alive. My gosh, that song just blew up over the years. You know, and everybody and their brother has recorded that song. And I know it's one of those things where everybody says that you never know that you've got a hit until it happens. But when you write a song like that, do you kind of know, I think I got something here?
You know, I don't know it from a commercial point of view when I'm writing it. As a matter of fact, if you're kind of conscious of the commercial point of view as you're writing, you're in trouble. The song left the building. But I try to stay with a song like You'll Never Leave Harlan Alive is telling my family story. That's how that song is about how my family came from coal mining of Harlan County into poor tobacco farming, in about 2 counties over. And that was kind of the hillbilly highway. So to me, it wasn't about I'm reaching for some commercial place. As a matter of fact, why would a song that mentions my grandmother and the rivers of that area and, very personal story, why would that be one of the most recorded songs I have? That defies logic. So I wasn't chasing a commercial thing. I was trying to tell my family's story and then, there's a point where I'm writing a song and the song takes over. So for example, in You'll Never Leave Harlan Alive, my great-grandfather, who that song is about, he actually didn't go back to the mines and die in my family background. But that's the story I gave him. That's the ending I gave him and the song, because that's the power we have as writers. We get to tell the story the way we want to. And so it's not completely autobiographical, but it's like 92%.
Well, and that's plenty.
Exactly.
And like Rodney Crowell said in the new country music documentary, country music at its best is truth-telling, even if it's a big fat lie. So certainly a song that's 92% truth, that's pretty good odds.
That's plenty. Yeah, that's plenty of truth in there, and that's of course where the song started and largely even went to. But the songwriter in me needed to make it a song and not just a family tale. And when push comes to shove in a creative outlet, I'm going to lean toward the creative thing.
Well, and the most recent rendition of that song was recorded, of course, by the late Troy Gentry, Montgomery Gentry.
And, is that right?
That's right. It was the last project they did before he passed away.
Oh.
And I was reading online that what happened when they got in the studio was they decided that they would each do a song that they loved. And Eddie decided to do a Merle Haggard song, and Troy wanted to do You'll Never Leave Harlan Alive.
Oh, that's great.
And have you had a chance to hear that yet?
I have not heard that. I knew that was on a new album, but I haven't heard it. Wow, I got to go find it now. I'll go look it up.
It really is great, and pretty fitting, too, because it sounds like he probably could relate to it a lot.
Right. Oh, I'm going to find it, man.
Well, and I don't want to take up too much more of your time. I know you've been very gracious with us today. I want you to talk real quick about, you were telling stories on stage about your friends who are unfortunately no longer with us, like Guy Clark, and unfortunately your friend Jeff, who just passed away recently.
Yeah, he was supposed to be here tonight. I mean, I got his slot, so to speak, and not in any kind of silly way or crazy way, but, and so I wanted to do a song of Jeff's while I'm playing here at this festival. Jeff was supposed to be here at this time slot, and the least I could do is try to do one of his tunes.
So when you're doing a song like that, I've noticed with that song and when Guy passed away, you did a video of Desperados Waiting for a Train.
Uh-huh.
And it seems like you're so into it that it's like it maybe takes on a whole new meaning for you because it's from somebody that you cared for deeply.
Totally.
And how do you select a song in that time when you decide, you know what, I'm going to pay tribute to my friend, I'm going to play this one song? How do you come up with that?
Well, I can't exactly remember how I came up with Desperados out of all the hundreds of songs Guy has and of the dozens of ones that I myself have played with him. I've always loved Desperados. I think maybe for me on Desperados, my choice of that was because he was such a mentor for me. And in the story of Desperados, there's the kid, which is Guy. That's a true story. Guy grew up as a little kid with his grandmother's boyfriend is the guy in the song. And so he'd take him to the bars and, all that stuff that's in the song. And in a way, I see myself not exactly as the kid, the Guy Clark kid, but I see myself as a younger Guy hanging with a master whom I loved, and that's what Guy did. He loved, the man in the song. And so one little twist I do on that song is in the last verse where the guy's dying, and now the kid is now grown, and so the song ends with them playing Red River Valley, but they wrote a new verse together, and to me that's me and Guy, and it's taking great liberties with a masterful song, but hey, that's what singing is all about, and interpreting. So to me, that's how personal I get with it. I come right inside of a song, or try to. And the same with the Jeff song I did tonight. I was circling around some Jeff songs, like what could I do? And when I came to that song, Half Moon Rising, I understood it was about all those years of being a musician. You travel your butt off and you're trying to come home to some center. And so the whole song really is about, hey, I'm getting home finally after this tour, after these years, and I'm going to be with the one that I love, and man, won't it be good when I get there.
That's what it's all about.
Yeah.
Darrell, thanks so much for taking time to talk with me.
Thank you, Ryan.
And tell everybody where they can find you online and figure out where you're going to be next and what kind of music you got coming up.
Right, lots of touring coming up, lots of recording I'm doing. DarrellScott.com is the website, and it might be The Real Darrell Scott is the Facebook thing. And folks can find it. Really, if you just Google Darrell Scott, for the time being, I'm probably who comes up, even though there's a few other Darrell Scotts in the world.
Darrell, thanks again. Appreciate it.
Yeah, man.
I think it's pretty fitting that you could hear the Traveling McCurries playing in the background there. It really set the whole vibe for the interview. I'd like to thank Darrell and his wife Angela for being so great to us, and a big thanks to Brian and Bernice Hembry with the Fayetteville Roots Festival for making it all possible. Head on over to DarrellScott.com to check out his upcoming projects and tour dates. Next up, we've got a good old Arkansas boy, Shawn Camp. Shawn began his career by playing with the Osborne Brothers, Alan Jackson, Trisha Yearwood, and more as a fiddle player. After recording 2 albums for Warner Brothers back in the 90s, one of which wasn't released until just a few years ago, Shawn became arguably one of the most successful songwriters in Nashville. His songs have been recorded by Garth Brooks, Two Pina Coladas, Brooks and Dunn, How Long Gone You Gonna Be, Josh Turner, Would You Go With Me, and countless others. I'm telling you, if he wrote it, you've probably heard it. Shawn currently fronts the Earls of Leicester, an all-star Flatt & Scruggs tribute band. We caught up with Shawn at the Arkansas Country Music Awards this year, which was very fitting because the whole night was about Arkansas's place in country music, and few people represent it as well as Shawn. So let's give it a listen right here on Country Fried. And we're back here with Shawn Camp, one of my favorites. Shawn, thanks for taking time to talk with me today.
Thank you, Ryan. Good to see you.
First of all, just going back to when you first came to Nashville, if I'm not mistaken, you started out coming to town playing fiddle for the Osborne Brothers, right?
That's exactly right, yeah.
And then from there, kind of take me on the journey from fiddle player for the Osborne Brothers to recording artist to hit songwriter. How did that transition come about?
Well, it just, I don't really know how it happened. I just kept kind of working at it, and just trying to keep as many irons in the fire as I possibly could, and in hopes of something being successful, And so I moved there in January of '87 and went to work right away with the Osbornes, and only worked with them about 6 months. And then I worked with Shelby Lynn and Susie Boggess and Jerry Reed, Alan Jackson, Trisha Yearwood. Worked with all those folks as a sideman, playing fiddle or guitar or mandolin or all of the three, or whatever. But and also just started writing songs on the side, just trying to get that going.
Right. And you did end up getting signed to Warner Brothers.
I did.
And made a couple of records, but they only put out one. And so what became of your second release, they finally reissued it several years ago at this point, 1994. Yeah. And from what I understand at the time, they wanted you to make it a little more on the rockin' side, and you really didn't want to do that. Kind of tell that story.
Well, the president of Warner Brothers, I turned the record into him, and he said, well, it doesn't sound like the current John Michael Montgomery records, what he used for an example. I said, well, I know. He said, well, whatever you decide, we're behind you 100%. and I didn't realize when I decided to not change all these things, he wanted me to put electric guitars and take all the fiddles off of it and dobros and put electric guitar and just turned it into a different kind of record. And maybe I should have, because I would have maybe had more of a foothold in the mainstream country if I had, but it wasn't my style, and I couldn't really sacrifice what I felt was mine, my particular style, just to be like somebody else,
Well, and it seemed like you kind of bridged the gap on that album, though, because you had songs like Near Misses where you had plenty of electric guitar, and it was cranking pretty good. But could you imagine if Grandpa that I know had electric guitars and loud drums instead of the arrangement it had? That just wouldn't have fit.
Work, yeah.
Absolutely.
So I don't know. They had a lot going on, that company at the time, and so they had other things that they may have been more interested in doing than putting my records out, but that's fine, and I became a good tax write-off for them for a little while.
Well, after that, you ended up putting out independently, I believe, Lucky Silver Dollar.
I did.
And was that kind of a scary time to go into, just coming off of a major label, and then now I'm an independent artist? Well, were there any hang-ups for you as far as doing that, or did you just say, well, I'm going to put new music out there and I'm just going to do it myself?
Well, I cut that with Alan Reynolds, fellow Arkansan, great producer and friend of mine, and Mark Miller was there, and I was writing for Forerunner Publishing. That record we recorded it there in Jack's Track Studio, which is Jack Clement's old studio, and it was just a lot of fun, and I loved making that record. That's really my favorite record that I've ever done, still.
That's one of my favorites. I wish you'd pull out "Been There, Done That" every once in a while.
Yeah.
Man, I love that song. But
Well,
that whole
thank
record, and you ended up, from that, you had "How Long Gone," and you've been able to record your own versions of some of the hit songs that you've written over the years.
Yeah.
But I've noticed that you haven't always done that. I know Gary Nicholson, for instance, had a couple albums where he went back and did his versions of songs that had been hits for other artists. Is that something you've ever thought about doing?
I have, and I may do that. I'd kind of like to have enough hits to make a whole album,
You played for 3 hours at the Station Inn, and everybody knew every song. I think you've got plenty to get started,
well,
at least.
Thank you, man. I don't know, but I've thought about that. I've got 7 or 8 projects, concept records on the shelf ready to go. I just haven't started making them, and I got to do that. So I've got a lot of projects and a lot of music I want to share with people that no one's ever heard, and I really need to get on it, because you never know in these days what's going to happen.
Well, I want to hear it if nothing else.
Thank you,
it's
Ryan.
about time.
I appreciate it.
There's something I've always wanted to ask you.
Uh-oh.
When you it's not bad. At least I don't think it is.
All right.
When you were writing songs with Guy Clark, I noticed every once in a while his version would be just a little bit different from your version.
Yeah.
For instance, Magnolia Wind.
Yeah.
I noticed you do I'd Rather Die Young Than Live Without You as the last verse, and he always put that as the second verse at the song. Was that ever a conversation where you two just kind of had to agree to disagree, or?
Guy would always do things the way he wanted to do them, and that's there was a song we wrote on his last record that he won his only Grammy on, actually, on the My Favorite Picture of You album, and it's a song I wrote with him called "The Cornmeal Waltz," and the day of the last verse, we're in there recording it, and he changed the last verse. I said, man, that's not the way we wrote that, And he said, he took a big drag on his hand-rolled cigarette, and he said, you do it your way, and I'll do it my way. And I said, all right, man, you do what you want, But he did that to a lot of co-writers, actually, all of them.
Well, and when you first met him, and especially the first time that you wrote with him, was that kind of a scary thing, or at least an intimidating thing? He always seemed to be an intimidating presence, even though people said that you just would fall in love with him whenever you got to know him.
Well, he could be intimidating for sure, but once you get in close enough, he ain't that scary, He was something else, It's like I don't know, man. He taught me a lot, and he taught a lot of folks a lot. And just today, even today, you can read any line of his from any song. You can almost pull any line out and realize that line is extremely potent. Every word of, anything he put together was cut pretty deep,
I remember he was kind of beating himself up on Rain in Durango because he kept saying the last verse shouldn't have been there, in his opinion, on the last album. I remember in an interview he said, "I wrote too much of the story."
Rain in Durango?
Yeah, he said, "I wish I hadn't put that last verse in there because I didn't leave it open to the imagination enough." Meanwhile, I love the song.
Ah, well, I never heard him say that. I'd like to find that interview.
I believe it was NPR when that record first came out.
Ah, well, I don't know, man. He was as fickle as me and you. I mean, there was one day he'd think something, and the next day he'd think something else. He worked on songs for 30 or 40 years. Same song. So it's hard to second guess him. He was wonderful, and he didn't make many mistakes.
No.
Not when it comes to songs.
He's forgotten more about songwriting than most of us will ever remember.
Yeah.
That's for sure. But I got one more question for you, man. It seems like if there's anything I've learned from just following your career over the years, if somebody were wanting to make a good career in the music business, it kind of helps to know how to do a lot of things. And there are so many hats you've worn: recording artist, songwriter, producer. What advice would you give to somebody if they were wanting to try to make a career in the music business these days?
I would think study everything you can. I didn't study the right stuff, probably. I mean, I should have been studying marketing and promotion and stuff like that, because evidently you got to have a lot of that, even, these days, to make it in the country music world, or in the music world at all. It helps if you got a lot of money right off the bat. Then you can hire something done, But I don't know. I never did have any money, so I just what little I made picking,
That's
about
right.
it.
Well, man, thanks so much for taking time to talk to me, and tell everybody where they can find you online to keep up with your shows and music and everything.
That's ShawnCamp.com, ShawnCamp.com.
All right. Shawn Camp, thanks so much again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Ryan. Enjoy it.
Now there's a good dose of Arkansas for you. Thanks again to Shawn for the great interview, and an even bigger thanks to our friends Nathan Honeycutt and Charles Haynes with the Arkansas Country Music Awards for having us at this year's event. Be sure to check out ShawnCamp.com for all of Shawn's upcoming projects and tour dates, including shows with the Earls of Leicester and some very special Guy Clark tribute shows with Verlin Thompson, another one of my favorites. And I think that's just about going to do it for this week. Join us again next week for more of the best country music conversations right here on Country Fried. See you then. Be sure to subscribe to us on your platform of choice, share this episode with your friends, and leave us a comment. We want to know what you think. I'm Ryan Harmon, and this is Country Fried, an AETN production. Find out more at aetn.org.